Yeah, hi everyone. This is the first time in a while that we've done a dedicated showcase event where we've really taken a step back and given you the big picture about what's been going on the Ripper and Bobs, which is now being renamed to the Open Digital Planning Project overall. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of where we are to date, but this is the agenda for the session. You're going to hear a little bit from me, hopefully not too much, and then we're going to have a demo of the PlanX guidance service, find out if you need planning permission from Hope from Southwark. Then Greg from Lambeth is the assessment service, that's the BOPS back office planning system side of the work. We're going to hear from Freya from Southwark about how the services have been performing so far in her council. And then Catherine from Lambeth and I will talk about how we work together as a combined project team with now 9 partners from local gov and various other agencies supporting us. And I'll give you a bit of an indication of where we're heading next and what opportunities are available to join the project in the future, especially what kind of funding is going to be available soon. Really, we're starting from a point of connecting into the existing planning reform agenda and helping to move the system from one that's based on documents to one that's based on data. I think the fantastic thing about this work is that it's been completely led by councils and initiated by councils from about 2019, which even predated the publication of the planning white paper and the way the legislation has continued through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this. You're going to see this as a recurring theme and core message throughout all of the presentations from the different speakers today. This is just a bit of a run through some of the key milestones so far. So Ripper, reducing invalid planning applications, and BOPS, back office planning system, they started as 2 separate projects that came to Deluxe Local Digital Fund back in 2019 to ask for funding. Now, as you may be aware if you've been following along various show and tells and other things, these tackle 2 different parts of the planning application process. The idea of reducing planning applications addresses needs on the submission side and back office planning system on the officer processing and assessment side. Following the independent work they've been doing for a year or so from 2019 as into separate projects, in 2020 it was decided that actually there was going to be real benefit in aligning project activities so that the services that were being developed through Ripper could pass that application information into a back office system that could receive them as data points and see what interesting opportunities there were. And so Ripper and BOPS have been working together since and aligning their product roadmap activities since then. Since about last summer, 2021, whereas they'd aligned their purposes, they weren't necessarily aligned in terms of project team. We've taken more of a 1 team, 2 products approach. And last summer, the very first private beta services were launched for testing for lawful development certificate applications, where users were invited in to test them, but they weren't yet publicly available for anyone to log on to a council's website to join. That's changed this year since August. Public beta services have been launched. Got 6 new council partners who have joined the project team since the start of the year. And we're launching really today, in an important sense, Open Digital Planning as a slight rebranding of the Ripper and BOPS projects, because we'd heard, well, I'll come on to this, but we'd heard many times that these were 2 acronyms that were a little bit mouthy and didn't convey perhaps the meaning of what we're trying to achieve. So hopefully we're aligned now under a nice banner, and this is the branding you can see. Next slide, please. 3 live services that are live on 3 councils' websites and going live on 6 others soon. There's a guidance service, which is built on PlanX, so that residents can find out if they need planning permission for a project. An application service also built on PlanX, so that residents can apply for a lawful development certificate, and we hope to add more applications in the future. And an assessment service, which is processed using the back office planning system for the assessment and management of planning applications. This is a list of all the councils that are currently working on the project team. We are looking to expand this in the future, but we've got 9 partners at the moment. Started off with Buckinghamshire, Lambeth and Southwark, and has been expanding to others more recently. And as I said, a big move and a big moment today is when we formally kind of launch the new name of the project. Open Digital Planning is what we're going to be referring to Ripper and BOPS as. We're retiring the name Ripper entirely because reducing invalid planning applications isn't we didn't feel it was the name of a service as such, in the same way as a product that you might buy or that you might engage with. And our new website is live as of today as well. So please go to opendigitalplanning.org to have a look. As with all things that we've been working on, it's very much a minimum viable product. It's the first thing that we could launch for you today that adds real value and tells our story. So there's going to be a lot more content and design being added to that over the next weeks and months. But hopefully you'll get a real good sense of what it is that we're talking about, how you can get involved in these things, and finding some next steps to go on your journey in terms of exploring open digital planning in the future.
So yeah, I'm Hope. I'm a digital transformation officer at Southwark Council, and I'm going to take you through an end-to-end view of the guidance service for open digital planning. And this is how you would find it coming as a resident to Southwark. So these are our planning and building control pages. And you'll see it here in the banner. We've also made it super accessible. It's very common user need that people need to find out whether they need planning permission for whatever project they're doing, and they'll often maybe call up or email normally to find out. So here we can click on this. So this is where you would land, and you can see it's a free service. It advises that this is guidance and not a legal decision. And we even direct them to other services further down that they might need, like pre-application advice, and also apply for lawful development certificate, which, as you know now, is built on PlanX, and it's a very similar structure, but it just allows us to do extra things and submit it using the same flow architecture. So this has been created alongside developers and content experts with planners and other experts from local government. So we're going to go and access the service. So this is PlanX, which we used to refer to as RIPAs, reducing invalid planning applications, which was the basis of the whole project. So you can see it's hosted on the council website, it's a subdomain, so we move quite seamlessly, and it's got all the council branding, so that the trust that remains that you're on council service. So I'll just put in get my postcode. And then we can choose the address here. And at the moment, this is MVP aimed at householder properties. So you do need to have an address. But in the future, we're looking that you can extend this for properties without, which may be especially for user need for rural councils, and especially as we move on to different project types. So from this about your property page, it pulls up the authority, we can see here, and the building type, and a dot which highlights your property or the one you're inquiring about. And this is querying ordnance survey data for maps, and the user can interact with it, as you can see here. And this is normally correct, but one of the benefits is that through various feedback mechanisms, we can see here report an inaccuracy. Users have been able to report to us any issues with, for example, the building type, which we can then feed back into LLPG data. So again, it's a much more kind of efficient system than we would have had before. So this page then directs users to the plan and history if we keep going. Oh wait, no, so oh no, I'm doing 52, so I'll just do this one. I'll skip. So this allows you to digitally draw the outline of your site, and this is a tool that we've worked really hard to improve. Previously, it would have been upload a PDF. Obviously, this is a guidance service, but if we were to submit an application, and it often led to lots of inaccuracies around sites not being drawn correctly or missing requirements like a north arrow or a scale bar. And one of the benefits of this is that throughout we have this help text down the side, which explains how it's defined and what needs to be included. And this is all a part of, improving the quality of applications we get. Because this is the same tool is built into our application service. So if we were to submit it, this would be sent through to the back office system as data. And this helps those who can do it themselves, so that they don't need to hire a third-party service to draw a plan for them. And it also provides additional benefits. For example, here it calculates the area of the site, which could be useful for future services that we can build this function into, especially when that will determine fees. However, this is just a guidance service and the data is not collected. But this polygon does help us pull up important constraints, as we'll see on the next page. So this is querying national and local GIS data sets, currently via an API with Digital Land, who we've worked quite closely with, and it's to improve data in general within planning. So these constraints are all those available, and mainly those relevant to the application type that we've been focusing on at the start, which was lawful development certificates. But with more data sets in the future, we'll be able to add to this. So now we're going to the main bit, which is kind of looking at what project you'd like to do. So we've also done a lot of work on this to kind of create a big shopping list of all those possible. And this has been edited over time based on user feedback about what people want to do and basically how they'd describe it and how they'd find it. So you can select as little or as many as you like, and this determines what questions you'll be asked later. So we'll just take a little look through so you can see kind of what type of things people can apply about. Extensions is very common. So for here, we're just going to maybe add a skylight to an existing roof, because this is quite a common householder project. But like I said, you can select as many as you like. And this is where it really does the work of like decoding the GDPR for you. It'll ask you quite specific questions from here on out, which determine whether your project will fall under permitted development and if it would need planning permission. And often with like quite simple instructions. So, for example, here this says, was your house always a house? And so this is where we tried to put stuff into plain English. So before it might have been, what was the previous use? And here we just said, was your house always a house? And again, there's the help text is here, and it asks you, it kind of explains why, and for those that would want to know, gives the reference to planning regulation. So yeah, so we'll just say yes, there was always a house. And was a house built before or after 2020? So again, it's quite brief there. So here we are, like this is where also it gives you kind of simple illustrations and additional text, as we mentioned. And anyone that's read planning legislation will know it's often not easy. There's lots of clauses. You might have to go to different relevant sections, and they may be spread out. And this really helps to bring it all into one place. Again, in plain English, which is a big focus for us. So yeah, so we'll say it's going to be, does the skylight stick out more than 15 centimeters from the roof? And we'll say no here. But and then say we haven't read the help text, but here it is, and we're going to say it's going to be higher than the original rooftop. So yeah, this was the planning history. So again, this is something that's not integrated into the service now, but it's a big sign of some of the issues joining up data within the planning industry, and it's something we're looking to do, kind of get planning history that we can pull into, especially our assessment service. So here we are. It says this is a result that I've been given based on what I've said, and it looks like I will need planning permission for my project. And I can also see why I've got this result. So here, this is really helpful. It kind of reduces the amount of queries we get. So now I know specifically this was the problem that I said it was higher. So then there is the option to go back. So what I could do is I could kind of, it might change what I would like to do on my project. Now I know that these are kind of the design issues or why it would need to apply for planning permission. So say this time I'm going to say it's lower than the top of my original roof. And now it looks like I do not need planning permission. So now it comes under GDPR basically. So then we get the next steps. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the same platform, PlanX, that we use to create our lawful development certificate. So then this includes extra features such as the ability to upload documents and drawings, and it will just ask for those relevant to your project, which use this kind of like flow architecture to figure out. And you can also enter your email and save and return to your application and get GovNotify emails, and you can also pay through GovPay when the correct fee is calculated, also based on the answers that you give. So we have this kind of modular way of editing and publishing services. So councils can also add additional questions. For example, those in London, like Southwark, we can specify questions that request for data for London Hub, Data Hub, so such as energy efficiency certificates, and that kind of saves work for planners as well. So, and currently, if they apply through the service, submitting documents, which is that other one you saw in the banner earlier, these will come through to the existing back office system via an API and also a uniform. So let's continue. So this is what we'll see next. So where would we like to go next? We can go back and try out another project. This is the apply for lawful development certificate that I mentioned. Proceed without. And this is really, so then we just gives us a link to the service. And well, it's not really loading today. This is more of an issue with Southwark internet than the actual platform. So this would just take us to a page that would look like very similar to what we had before. And another thing I just want to mention is that another great thing I mentioned about the feedback with data earlier is that we've added, there's various points in which you can also feedback on the service. So we'd love you to try it out and try break it and, you know, send us any issues you have. So one of the links here, you can click feedback at the bottom and kind of report anything that went wrong on the service. And what I would say is that there's also this option to add a screenshot, which is really helpful and helps us to know where you were on the service when you encountered a problem. So please do that. And it's not in any way to capture any personal data, so don't worry about that. So yeah, I think that's everything for today. I'll hand on to the next presenter.
So what is BOPS? Essentially, it's a holistic planning application assessment service. And we need it because existing back office systems are not intuitive. They create excessive admin for council staff, and they foster an environment where offers can make simple to make manual errors. And existing back office systems and processes need upgrades and new features to meet the actual needs of planning officers. And the evidence of this is in the workarounds that are required for planning application. And next slide. The first one is that most officers, when they start work at a council, they'll create a spreadsheet like the one in this slide, and where they keep track of all their applications. And although some back office planning systems have application tracking capabilities, they don't actually meet the expectations of planning officers, hence the need to build their own trackers on these spreadsheets. From there, officers have to use a ton of different programs to be able to assess an application, and I've shown a few on here. The first one is a program to search for planning constraints. They then have to write, they have to look for the legislation as number 2. Number 3 is they actually write their office reports in Word. All documents are served in a document management server. In Lambeth, you have to use a separate program to view files. And then number 6, if you want to communicate with the applicant, you use an email service, and number 7 is just once applications are ready for signing off, they're put into a log. And our goal with BOPs is to build in all the way the officers work into one piece of software that they actually use. So what have we built? It's a new back office planning system that responds to officers' needs, and that will provide increased efficiencies and reduce potential for manual errors. It comprises 2 parts, which is the case management system and then the planning application assessment tool. I'll talk about the case management system first. So rather than officers having to build their own spreadsheets to keep track of the caseload, that's done in our new case management system. And it's accessible by everyone, which means that managers can see the progress of all applications, and 2 officers can see if their managers started to sign off of their cases. The second part is we've built an application assessment tool. All the information the officer needs is now available in one location, and essentially this is broken into 2 parts. The top part is essentially that all the information that an officer needs to assess an application is up there in the top red box, and then the place to write their applications, to validate them and to do the sign off is below. And all of the information in this dashboard is ordered according to the feedback we receive from planning officers. So that's just what we've produced. In the past, you had to search out what the planning constraints were. Using GIS layers, we can now automatically pull that information into the BOP service. And if you just click again, we'll see what the constraints are for this application. And there's none. Instead of going to a separate document management system, officers can now store and view all of their applications in BOPs. And if we open this tab, all of your documents come up. At the moment, our product only allows officers to view and rename documents, but in time we intend to increase functionality so plans can be measured and redacted. We also have a tagging feature, which just will make it easy for officers to find particular documents. So they might want all of the proposed documents, there'll be a proposed tag. They might want all of the elevations, so there'll be an elevations tag, just how tags normally work. You'll also notice that each document can be set to public or private. This function will eventually connect with public registers, so documents in BOPs will be visible to the public. When it comes to the validation, assessment, and sign-off, we have inbuilt officer checklists into BOPs to make sure officers don't forget to do any of the important steps in the application process. And officers can also write their report directly into BOPs and send the report to the manager for sign-off. And we are, for LDC applications anyway, all of the relevant limitations and conditions will be automatically uploaded into the officer report so that they don't need to extract those from the legislation manually. And then finally, BOPs automatically alerts a manager that a case is ready for sign-off and gives them access to the officer report. So there's no need to refer to a sign-off log or to another file to view the officer report. I said earlier that existing processes and systems result in potential for manual error. An example in Lambeth is that you need to enter drawing and document up into 3 separate locations. I've just shown that here on this slide. They have to enter into the DMS, then into the officer report, and then into the back office system. And we've often find that officers these documents can be referenced differently or incorrectly. With BOPs, there is just one source of truth. You only enter in the document reference numbers once. They get automatically pulled into the officer report and into the decision notice. Just wanted to thank you for listening, and I hope you can understand why I'm so excited for this product. I really think it's going to be a genuine help to many case officers, and that they'll be great to helping them in their day-to-day. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. That was a great whistle-stop tour of a lot of the thought process that have gone behind BOPs as well. Next, we're over to Freya, who's going to talk about just how things have been going since the live services have been running in Southwark Council.
Great, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone watching. My name's Freya, and I'm a digital transformation officer at Southwark. So this is how many cases we've received since we went live in August. So Bugs has come out on top with 43 cases, and altogether we've had 64 public beta cases come through in the past few months. And we also have had some private cases that came through that you can see on there as well, that we put the That was when we sent out the link to agents and applicants about making it live on our websites. So we're really happy with the engagement that we've had so far with both of the open digital planning products. We've noticed that on PlanX, we mainly get applications from house owners, not agents, and we expected that because we are linking to PlanX from our own council web pages, as Hope showed us on her slides. We think that these figures show that there is definitely an appetite from the public for a different way of applying for planning. And we also think that it shows that the comms programs that we run back in the summer have been working, so that people do know about PlanX and about BOBs as well. As Matt just said, we have been processing all of our PlanX cases on our legacy systems as well, but we've been trying to bring as many of them through on BOBs as we can so we can get user feedback from our officers as they're working with this really important real life data. Next slide, please, Tim. Thank you. So having seen these great demos by Hope and Greg, I'm sure everyone's really keen to know how things have been going for us. Overall, things have been going really great. So we've had some great successes here, including the users of PlanX have reported that they find the help text really useful. So when Hope was showing you, we have the little question mark, that icon that people can click on, because that helps them to understand why they're being asked certain things or why they're being asked to submit certain plans. So we've got really great feedback about that, and we've got feedback that people have felt that's helped them to understand the planning process a bit better, which is one of the goals of all this work that we're doing. We've also found that validators using BOBs, they've given us really positive feedback on how that validation process on the service works, the way it flows and what it allows them to do, especially the way it makes it a lot easier for them to request changes from the applicant or agent that they need to make a case valid. And we've got quite good feedback on the red line boundary tool as well. In general, we found that people are coping really well with using these new tools. Whenever you introduce a new sort of digital service, it can be difficult to know, are people going to want to use it and are they going to be able to use it? And actually we found that yes, a lot of people have found PlanX and BOBs really intuitive, accessible, and that they want to keep using those. And a lot of that is thanks to all the rounds of the in-depth user testing that have taken place over the past 2 and 3 years to get us to this point. And something else that's gone really well is that our devs from Unboxed and Open System Labs, they're really fast to respond to any issues that we've had. So usually, as the product owners, if we raise an issue on our internal channels, then within minutes or an hour, that problem is solved, and we're able to learn from those issues and to keep making iterative changes and improvements as we go along. We have also had some things that have come up that we know we still need to work on. So for example, I just said that our devs are really fast at fixing issues and bugs, which is amazing. But ideally, we want to get to a point where there aren't any errors so that users can have total trust in PlanX and in BOBs, and we don't need to use any workarounds to get things done. There have also been some issues that have come up that have been specific to individual partners. So for example, at Southwark, we had a case come through on PlanX that didn't get pushed through to our legacy system because the reference number was too long. So there was sort of a state of limbo where we couldn't find this case. We were able to access it on BOBs. We had to actually manually copy across all the data. So that was a one-off, and that has now been fixed. But errors like that, when they come up, they can tend to take quite a bit of officer time to resolve. As I said, we're really happy that we've been receiving so many cases, but with that high level of engagement comes a lot of feedback, and we're still working on exactly how we're going to process and respond to all that feedback, because we want our users to really feel empowered and to feel that everything that they say to us is actually being listened to and built into the tools. And a final point, we found that there has been some confusion from users on what the difference between find out if you need planning as a guidance service and the apply for LDC service are. Some people haven't realised that you can only submit on the apply for LDC service. So there might be still a bit of space around there that we need to really get the point across that these are two standalone individual services with quite different endpoints. Next slide, please, Tim. Thank you. So this is an example of something that we've been working on for a while, and that's the digital sitemap. So as you already saw on Hope's slides, users on PlanX are invited to draw their own red line boundary onto a digital sitemap. And this is pushed through to BOBs, where it can be edited if necessary, if there's any errors during the validation process. So we put loads of time into user research sessions around this task, and we've written what we think is really clear help text on Plan X. However, we are still finding that in some cases we are getting incorrect red line boundaries come through. So for example, the screenshot on this slide, you can see that the person has just drawn quite a small box around one part of that property. And the reason for that is that this person lives in a flat that is at the front of the property. And so they've drawn what they think is just their flat outline, which isn't exactly what we would usually expect to see when we do get a site map for a planning case. So we have seen this for flats in particular, and in cases like this, we might still need to give a bit more thought to, with the end goal being that we really increase the confidence of users on Plan X, and then we can reduce the amount of time spent having to correct some of these poorly drawn or inaccurate site maps on Bobs. So that's all from me, and I'm going to pass on to Catherine from Lambeth.
Thanks, Freya. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Catherine Neal. I'm head of service at Lambeth, looking after engine room functions in planning, so that's finance, systems, SIL and S106. And I'm one of the original 3 leaders, along with Pete Forrest, who is at Wickham in Bucks, and Juliet Seamer at Southwark, who got together back in 2019 to solve these problems. I'm going to talk about those early days to when the 2 projects became one, to give you a bit of a flavour of what it's like to work on them. And it's worth saying that, as Matt mentioned at the very start, we were 2 separate projects. However, we were cross-fertilising one another, with Lambeth, Southwark and Wickham all involved in both projects, as well as having other partners unique to each of the 2 projects. So why did we do this? Well, you'll see on the next slide, we had a problem with invalid planning applications, along with the system that was used to assess them. And it turned out, following surveys across the country that we undertook, that it was a national problem. On average, 50% of householders were being submitted invalid, and that rose to around 80% for LDCs that were submitted by residents. It was lower for agents. And they were all invalid at the point of submission, and the system to assess them was clunky and inflexible, and that was creating additional admin for councils with no extra money to cover this. We found the worst case scenario, an application actually went around the system 9 times, believe it or not, before it was made valid. Of course, this was making applicants completely fed up with what they saw as an opaque and incredibly difficult system to navigate. And on the next slide, you can see some of the comments we've received around the current system. Dreadful process shrouded in deceit and secrecy. I mean, that's not true, and most of the planners in the room will know that, but this is how the system was and is being perceived. And that increases the pressure with members' inquiries, complaints, and really gives planners who work incredibly hard with huge workloads an unfair representation. So, as you'll see on the next slide, a group of like-minded councils grouped together and secured funding to develop a solution. There were key criteria to it, and you can see there that we had to use agile methodology, work collaboratively, have a user research, user-centered design. And we also ran lots of stakeholder workshops with each partner, councils, planning officers, and did lots of user testing, ran fortnightly workshops for core partners to discuss high-level strategy, detail, and what we needed to get our head around in terms of making the tools work. In the early alpha phase, there were 5 councils contributing on the Ripper project, and I think there were about 4 on the BOPS, with varying levels of input. But it didn't matter if a council could only contribute, say, a day every month, or even only attend once. It was all valuable input and really helped us encourage that collaborative ethos and open approach. So on the next slide, you can see our overarching premise. And our mantra was moving from documents to data and to design out the chance for errors. So don't ask what we already know. If we know they're in a conservation area, why are we asking them? The diagram on the bottom right is hopefully a simple illustration of what that means for those less data savvy here. So I mentioned a criteria of funding was collaboration, and as you can see on the next slide, there are some downs to that approach. Of course, there are all sorts of complexities with that when you have a group of different councils. You've got different politics, rural versus city. And whereas in one council, it's clear who the leader is making decisions, because we wanted it to be collaborative, everyone felt free to speak out and contribute. And equally, everyone felt okay to have a good old moan, which could be quite exhausting to be on the receiving end of it. Also, and I'm going to use the word different a lot here, so sorry about that, the problem was experienced differently by different councils because different officers did different parts of the validation process. And there were some very hostile planners in some of the partner areas who were critical and resistant to change. Luckily, we were ready for their arguments because in Alpha, one of the partners took on the role of devil's advocate throughout. So we had that kind of the answers prepared. Sadly, a couple of partners dropped away over Alpha and Beta because it was a huge ask at that time. And we were all doing this alongside our day job. Such was our passion for this work. But we got around the difficulties. And on the next slide, you'll see the collaboration wins. An early decision provided a positive win, and that was to rotate the venue for our fortnightly workshops. And this meant we could demonstrate everyone was involved and important. We wanted to be open and show we were willing and prepared to put ourselves out, going to each other's offices and not base everything at one council. And obviously in remote that changed. We learned Agile at the start of Alpha as a group, and learning together obviously allowed early bonding and team building. And we ran fortnightly show and tells throughout Alpha and Beta, sharing the topic presentations across partners. We had some really great laughs and camaraderie and a mantra of there's no such thing as a stupid question, which I think is really important. We also had solid support from the local digital team, with a dedicated officer stepping in and steering us when they felt we were going off on a tangent or missing something key, such as a professional user researcher. And if one council were good at getting volunteers for testing and user researching, then they did it for everyone, all the partners, not just their borough. It really was about working, and it still is, about working together as one project. We also have wider collaboration across the councils. So if a partner struggled internally to get something through, such as using GovPay for the payment system, then the partner who was able to get that through would share what they did, such as business cases. And if that didn't work, we'd send along ADs and directors from finance or IT or whoever, and they'd meet with their equivalent in partner councils to get those obstacles removed and push things through. And that was a level of collaboration I don't think any of us had foreseen happening at the beginning. You'll see on the next slide the users at the core. In Alpha, we thought we knew what customers wanted. You know, we had members, inquiries, and complaints. We don't need anyone to tell us. But DLUC insisted we got professional user researcher, and we became converts to user research and realised we didn't know everything, and actually the insights were amazing. We also encouraged all the partners to observe and note take so that you can really get a feel and understand what those problems applicants experienced. Just ahead of our private beta trial last year, we also recruited non-planners within councils to pretend to be customers and gave them dummy scenarios to try the system and see if they could use it. And we recruited planners who hadn't been involved in the project to see if they could use the back office system. And actually, that was really enlightening, but also really, encouraging. It was a good positive feedback. And it also continues to build engagement and involvement of other parts of the council, which is vital for buy-in and getting them to feel a part of the change. On the next slide, you'll see talking about the internal stakeholder workshops that we did, again, rotated in venues pre-lockdown and allowed everyone's wider planning teams to get involved and say what they thought the process was, where we'd gone wrong, what we'd forgotten. We set up Twitters and Facebooks and things, and we created a term called the Questions to the Brains Trust so that we could send questions to our lawyers for views on niche queries. We blogged pretty much every show and tell, ran all the agile ceremonies such as retros, stand-ups. But being that we're spending public money, there was, and there still is to a degree, an element of being non-agile in our working. With the reporting and governance type of stuff that we have to do. And that's for us as councils, but also for DLUC as a department. So our outputs, a final slide here. Since 2019, we've contacted thousands of past and present applicants and tested with over 100 across the country. We've run surveys to get survey feedback and listen to their views. In 2021, we ran a pretty successful private beta, and in a 2-week period had a deluge of applications which threw up lots of issues we hadn't foreseen. But on the plus side, showed what we needed to tweak ahead of the public beta, which is now live. We've also grown the number of partners, as Matt mentioned. We've merged the 2 projects as one and have developed a joint website for ODP. And the public beta that was launched earlier this year with feedback has been overwhelmingly positive and enthusiastic. So overall, I'd say if you are looking to replace your existing system or you're dealing with too many invalid applications, then these 2 tools are probably for you. We're changing the way we do things, and I'd really encourage you to follow us. And if the opportunity is there, to get involved. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks a lot, Catherine.
And yeah, I think it's just a great moment to reflect on what a long way the projects have come, actually, and the colossal amount of work that was put into getting them off the ground in the first place. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk a bit more about what it would be like for future partners to be involved in this and how things have kind of evolved, because a lot of those practices, as you could tell, were pre-pandemic in many ways. And so we're working in a slightly different way now, and we're also working with a greater pool of partners. We are now 14 organisations working on this, with more than 30 people altogether, and they're not just logos. We're real people as well who meet up regularly. Most of the work is done remotely. We do, of course, catch up, but I think that the remote way of working has been a real opportunity for the team to accelerate a lot of the practices, albeit those fortnightly meetups that Catherine talked about aren't really practical anymore, not least of all because we've just got more partner councils from different parts of the country working with us. Now, the teams come together at a kind of a juncture a year ago, and these are revisited and refreshed regularly to consider what the values and principles are for how we work, because it's not easy, and definitely during the pandemic it was harder, and the remote way of working has demanded a slight tweaking in how things are done. So we've got, for example, a comprehensive team charter which the team has put together to define how they want to work together. We won't go through that in detail. We've also got on the next slide a comprehensive set of design principles which help guide our thinking when making design decisions and guide the approaches that we take. Of course, all the time, if you go to the next slide, we're thinking back to the local digital declaration and the key things there. So all partners that are part of this project have signed the local digital declaration. If you're not familiar with it, it's a kind of a statement document that was initially put together by 45 organisations working in local public services, from councils to people like the Local Government Association and Solace, the Society for Chief Execs in Local Government. And it kind of aligned on these 5 key principles, which I won't go into now, as a vision for the future of public services in local government. And that first one's really important. So if we go to the next slide, we're designing products, as Catherine said, around user needs. So user-centered design and research methods help make sure that the products that we're designing actually meet the core needs of the users, because we can't really design new sort of 21st century planning services without planning officers and the people that are making planning applications at the heart of what these services look like, how they feel and how they work. And with that in mind, we, as Catherine alluded to, we ran into a moment where, a happy moment and a moment where we needed to pivot, I suppose, where the work of the initial Ripper and Bops project team started to coincide with the National Planning Reform Agenda. And what that meant was much greater significance attached to it in terms of a policy priority. It became part of a government major project portfolio, which is much more significant kind of status from the kind of innovation project it might have started off as, and it's got more significant funding attached to it. And with that funding comes an opportunity to better resource, I suppose, the teams that are contributing to this. So rather than councils now giving up their spare time to contribute to product development, we're able to resource specific individuals to take part in specific activities on the project. And to really guide this, we've got what we call team functions. I'll just outline those quickly. So you can see here we've got specific ones of product owners that help make product decisions. Initially that was for Ripper. That's obviously going to be that PlanX now needs to be updated. And on the back office side, we've got specific roles for content subject matter experts, people that understand legislation and can write the question sets and translate that legislation that goes into the service. And then project delivery expertise as well, and really importantly, that data systems and integrations expertise that helps make it work. Each function has a specific set of responsibilities, and on the next slide is one example, which is that content subject matter expert. So you can imagine what it might be like if your council was to join the project team. Got an outline of what the kind of person, what kind of experience the person should have, the responsibilities they have, which is a bit exhaustive, and we are in the process of refreshing this, by the way, so please don't be too scared or alarmed by what you're seeing on there, because it can be extensive. But also that links through to resource expectations across a week or fortnight in terms of meeting attendances and the amount of work that's
required. This enables us to understand what the value should be or commitment should be coming from a council partner into the project team, but also to make sure that we are backfilling those commitments as well to make it worth your while and to make sure that your BAU planning services don't suffer as a consequence of this. This is a map of how work happens on the project these days. So there are specific blue circles there where certain activities happen related to BOPs on the left, the RIP or Planex product on the right, and there's content and flows work, and then there's general project operations. And the people performing those specific functions sit in those groups and they attend certain sets of meetings, take part in certain activities that are orchestrated with others in those groups as well. So there's a really clear structure for how work happens and where work happens. Just very quickly, this is all organised on a fairly structured meeting schedule where the different colour corresponds on this kind of calendar across a month corresponds to a different working group and a different set of functions. And then lastly to say on this is we know that not every council, in spite of funding we might provide and willingness, will be able to be involved to the maximum amount. The kind of involvement that we're seeing is just expressed along the bottom there. So typically for most of the partners we're working with at the moment, it's between a medium and a high level involvement, which means anywhere between 1 and 4 full-time equivalent people. Those that are more highly involved take a really leading role in the project and they're part of prioritisation decisions on the product, whereas those medium are more contributors that make the recommendations and suggestions. In the future, we want more to be involved as a low level of involvement. We think that there's a need here for councils who want to adopt the products and services and can take part in certain user groups to give feedback, but might not be in a position to take a really leading role just because many reasons, I'm sure, but maybe just because caseloads mean that it's not possible to scale up a team to take part in it to that extent. So that's just a quick whistle-stop tour of how we're working together. I think Catherine's really done a great job of talking about what it's like working on things, and hopefully I've given you a sense of the structures in place if you were to join and how you might be able to plug into the team in the future. The next steps for our work then. We have a vision roadmap which was defined by all partners on the project team last summer, and it does need to be refreshed, but I'll talk you through it quickly because this gives you a sense of where we're going. We're going to be meeting up on actually the 1st of December to do this, so there'll be something hopefully that we can publish fairly shortly after that's an update on this. Up to the private beta stage, so July 2021, the real focus was on demonstrating that actually this is possible, that local authorities can co-develop these services that are designed around user needs and take data-led approaches. What we've done so far then in the work to date is we've launched those public-facing end-to-end services for that single national application type, lawful development certificates. What we're working on now, among other things, is starting to think about applications that are relevant beyond just the GPDO to also have local variation in them. And what that means is to kind of translate that into something that makes more sense is we're starting to work on applications for full householder planning permission. What we'll then be doing later, and later is a really big bucket that is really everything that's after what we're working on immediately, and hence this needs a bit of a refresh, I think, is that we need to be able to demonstrate that the products that we're working on do work as viable alternatives to existing software, and that they can really do everything that existing software does in terms of processing those different types of applications. The long-term vision that we're moving towards is, as I've said, services that are viable alternatives to what your existing products do, but hopefully push those things forward because we've got that opportunity to develop things from scratch based around user needs, to think about what we can do that existing software doesn't, and hopefully encourage the market for existing software products to look at what we're doing and also move things in that direction, because ultimately we all want to make planning simpler, more transparent for applicants and residents. A key tenet behind this is how this will be managed and governed in the future. At the moment, our vision for open digital planning is that in the future it will be an independent legal entity that is jointly owned or governed by the councils that are part of it, and they would also determine the business and commercial model behind it too. So that needs to be, it does need to be affordable, but still needs to be determined, and that's something that we're going to be working on in the next 6 to 12 months. So finally, how you could be involved in this. As Deluxe Planning Software team, we are going to be launching something called the Planning Software Improvement Fund next week. We've got a launch session for that on Wednesday morning, similar time to today actually. So I'm sure one of my colleagues will share the link to the Eventbrite page so you can register for that in the chat. If you're on this call and you're from a back office provider, please come along too. I'll expand on the support that we're hoping to provide for people, for councils looking to work with their existing providers in a sec. But what we're looking for new open digital planning partners is to pick a level of involvement. Be more detailed on this in all of the information around the fund, to join the collaborative product development activities and to start to adopt the products. There will be 3 funding tracks in total. So the first track will be what I've just outlined, councils that want to adopt and design new services and join open digital planning. The second opportunity will be for councils that are interested in either the submission services, Plan X products that we've been developing, or the back office planning system, and are interested in working with their existing service providers on making those 2 things work together. So we're interested in seeing greater integrations between the Plan X services and other back office systems, and we're interested in other submission services such as the planning portal being able to work closely with the back office planning system assessment service. And the last opportunity is, we know not everyone wants to work on new software products, and actually lots of people are comfortable with the existing services they have, but would like to see these things to continue to develop. And there will be funds available for existing software products to be improved, and greater integrations or improved integrations between other submission services and other back office systems that are out there in the market. So the last slide, really, I think this is from me, is to say, please come join that launch event next week, where we'll go into a bit more detail about that. You can register on Eventbrite. We're going to have weekly, at least, drop-in sessions after we've launched that, different opportunities for people to ask questions about different aspects of the funding. We've also got a live survey at the moment, which is gathering information on councils' existing arrangements with suppliers and supplier contracts around development management planning software. And my colleague Kieran, I think, will probably share the link to that in the chat here. So I think that's everything that we've got to share with you today. Thanks so much for your time. If you've got any questions, or if there are any further questions in the chat, we can pick them up for conversation now. So please feel free to put your hand up or come off mute and ask away.